I was halfway through wiping down the last table when my phone buzzed with another message from my manager. Running late again tomorrow? I sighed and slipped the phone back into my pocket without answering. That had become my life over the past 6 months. Wake up before sunrise. Open the cafe. Work through the lunch rush. Stay late because someone always called in sick. Go home. Sleep. Repeat. At 26, I felt twice my age. Don't get me wrong, I liked my job. There was something satisfying about recognizing regular customers before they even ordered, knowing exactly how Mrs. Patterson liked her cappuccino or which blueberry muffin the college professor always grabbed on Thursdays. But routine has a dangerous way of making every day blur together. Until one evening broke it completely. It had been raining since noon. Not the dramatic kind with thunder and lightning. Just steady, cold rain that soaked through jackets and made the sidewalk shine under the streetlights. We closed an hour later than usual because the power had flickered twice. By the time I locked the front door, the streets were almost empty. I pulled my hood over my head and started walking home. My apartment was only 15 minutes away if I cut through the older neighborhood. Normally, I enjoyed that walk. That night, I barely noticed where I was going. I was thinking about bills, about whether I should finally replace my dying car, about how my younger sister kept insisting I needed an actual social life. "You work too much, Zachary," she'd said during our last phone call. "I'm paying rent. So is everyone else." Not everyone. You know what I mean. I did. I just wasn't ready to admit she was right. A loud metallic clatter snapped me back to reality. It came from somewhere ahead. Then another sound. Someone muttering under their breath. I looked up. A red pickup truck sat at an awkward angle near the curb, its rear hatch open. Boxes. Medical bags. A large rolled-up hose. Equipment I didn't recognize. One plastic storage bin had tipped over, scattering supplies across the wet pavement. The man kneeling beside it looked completely exhausted. His dark navy station shirt clung to his arms from the rain, and reflective suspenders hung loose around his waist. His boots were muddy enough to suggest he'd been wearing them for far longer than one shift. He rubbed both hands over his face before reaching for another box. One slipped. He caught it just before it hit the ground. "Barely," he muttered to himself. Without really thinking, I walked over. "Need a hand." He looked up so quickly I almost stepped back. He had light brown hair plastered to his forehead by the rain and tired blue eyes that looked like they hadn't seen 8 straight hours of sleep in weeks. For a second, he simply stared. Then he laughed quietly. "I must look pretty pathetic. You look like you're losing a fight with gravity." That earned a real smile. "I appreciate the honesty. I'm Zachary. Blake." He extended one hand before looking at it. "Actually, maybe don't shake it. Pretty sure I've touched every unpleasant surface in the city today." I laughed. "Fair enough." Together we started gathering the scattered equipment. Most of it was surprisingly heavy. "What is all this?" I asked. "Medical response gear." I lifted one case with both hands. "This weighs as much as a refrigerator. It definitely feels like it after 16 hours. I stopped. 16? He nodded. Shift got extended. "You've been working 16 hours? 18 now, technically." I stared at him. "No wonder you almost dropped everything." He shrugged with a tired smile. "It happens." There was something unusually calm about him. Not energetic. Not talkative. Just steady. Like someone who'd spent years dealing with emergencies and had forgotten how to panic over ordinary inconveniences. We loaded another container into the truck. "Seriously," he said. "Thanks. Most people would have kept walking." I almost did. "What changed your mind?" I looked at the rain collecting in the open storage bin. "You look like you needed someone to ask." He paused halfway through closing the hatch, then nodded once. "That's probably true." We stood there for a second while rain drummed softly against the truck. "So," I said, "you heading home?" "Eventually." He leaned against the tailgate. "I still have paperwork waiting at the station." I blinked. "After 18 hours?" He sighed dramatically. "Fire doesn't create reports. I guess someone has to." "Unfortunately." I laughed again. It surprised me how easy that felt. Most conversations with strangers ended after a few polite exchanges. This one didn't feel forced. It felt comfortable. "So," I asked, "is every shift like this?" "I hope not." He smiled. "Today was unusual." "Bad calls?" His expression changed almost imperceptibly. "Some." I immediately regretted asking. "You don't have to answer." "No." He shook his head. "It's okay." He looked toward the empty street. Some days remind you why people need us. And some remind you how fragile everything really is. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, I cleared my throat. I make pretty good coffee. He looked back at me. Congratulations? I laughed. No, I mean, the cafe's about 3 blocks from here. He frowned. You're inviting me to coffee after you've spent 10 minutes helping a complete stranger load a truck? I guess I am. He smiled again. The tired kind. The genuine kind. I appreciate it. Then he glanced at his watch. But if I sit down somewhere warm right now, you'll fall asleep. I'll absolutely fall asleep. Fair. He reached into the truck and grabbed a small notebook. You got a pen? I handed him one from my backpack. He wrote something quickly, tore out the page, and handed it to me. His number. In case your coffee offer survives until my next day off. I looked at the paper, then back at him. I wasn't expecting that. Neither was I. He scratched the back of his neck. But he hesitated just long enough to make me wonder if he'd change his mind. I'd like to keep talking. I smiled before I could stop myself. I'd like that too. He climbed into the driver's seat. The engine started with a low rumble. Before pulling away, he rolled the window down. Hey, Zachary. Yeah. Thanks. For helping. For stopping. Then he drove away. I stood in the rain for another minute with a small piece of paper in my hand. At the time, I thought I'd simply helped a firefighter after a long shift. I had no idea that a 5-minute conversation on a wet sidewalk was about to change the rhythm of my entire life. He was gone before I realized I was still smiling. I looked down at the paper again. Blake. A phone number. Nothing else. No last name. No little joke. Just a name and 10 digits. I folded it carefully and slipped it into my wallet, somewhere it wouldn't get soaked, then continued home. The entire walk, I kept replaying the conversation. Not because it had been extraordinary. Because it hadn't. There hadn't been flirting. No dramatic moment where our eyes locked across the rain. No instant certainty that we'd ever see each other again. It had simply felt easy. That was the strange part. Most conversations with strangers have an expiration date built into them. This one felt unfinished. When I unlocked my apartment, the first thing I noticed was silence. No television. No music. Just the hum of the refrigerator and rain tapping softly against the windows. I tossed my keys into the bowl near the door and headed straight for the shower. Hot water usually washed work off my mind. Not tonight. I kept seeing Blake standing beside that truck, exhausted enough to forget how heavy his own equipment had become. 18 hours. I couldn't imagine it. The longest shift I'd ever worked had been 11. By the end of it, I complained to anyone willing to listen. He'd spent 18 hours responding to emergencies and still apologized for looking tired. I shook my head. Different worlds. After dinner, I sat on my couch with my phone in my hand. His number was already saved. Blake. No last name. No photo. No idea whether I'd actually text him. I unlocked the screen. Locked it again. Unlocked it. Typed. Hope you made it through the paperwork. Deleted it. Too boring. Typed again. Try not to work another 18-hour shift tomorrow. Deleted. Sounded like someone's mother. I laughed quietly at myself. You're overthinking this. I finally settled on something simple. Glad you survived the rain. Thanks for trusting a stranger with expensive equipment. I stared at it for another full minute. Then pressed send. Immediately regretted it. Naturally, I threw my phone onto the couch and walked into the kitchen. Bad idea. Now I kept wondering whether it had buzzed. After exactly 37 seconds, I know because I looked at the microwave clock, I picked it back up. Nothing. Good. I set it down again. 5 minutes later, it vibrated. Blake. Pretty sure the equipment survived because you carried the heavy cases. Thanks again. A second message appeared almost immediately. Blake. Also, paperwork finally done. I'm officially off duty. I smiled. Me. Congratulations. You earned at least 12 hours of sleep. The typing indicator appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Blake. That's optimistic. I'm back tomorrow morning. I frowned. Me, seriously? Blake. Comes with the job. I leaned back against the couch. Me. Then coffee definitely has to happen. People shouldn't survive on station coffee forever. This time the response came almost instantly. Blake, you have very strong opinions about coffee. Me. Occupational hazard. 3 dots. Blake, fair enough. That was it. The conversation ended naturally. No awkward attempt to keep talking. No forced questions. I appreciated that. Somehow it made me more curious. The next morning started exactly like every other. At 5:30, my alarm went off. By 6:15, I was unlocking the cafe. By 7, the line stretched almost to the door. Morning commuters, construction crews, students, the usual chaos. Around 9, my coworker Emma walked beside me carrying a tray of pastries. "You look suspiciously cheerful." "I always look cheerful." She laughed. "No." She pointed a croissant at me. "You look like someone texted you." "I get texts." "You never smile at them." "I smile." "You absolutely don't." She narrowed her eyes. "Who is he?" I nearly dropped a stack of cups. "What?" "Oh, there it is." "What?" "That face." "I don't have a face." "You absolutely have a face." She grinned. "You met someone." "I met a firefighter." She blinked. Those two statements usually mean the same thing. I laughed despite myself. "It wasn't like that. MHM. I helped him load equipment after work. And we exchanged numbers." Emma slowly placed both hands on the counter. "I'm going to need significantly more information." "There isn't much." She stared. "Zachary." "What?" "You voluntarily gave your phone number to someone. He gave me his. You accepted." "I did." She gasped dramatically. "I need to sit down." "You're impossible." "I'm observant." She leaned closer. "Is he cute?" I hesitated. That hesitation answered the question for her. "There it is." I didn't say anything. "You didn't have to." She laughed so loudly one of the customers looked over. "Emma, I'm happy for you." "Nothing happened. Yet." I rolled my eyes. "We've exchanged exactly 4 text messages. Every relationship starts with fewer than 5. That's not how statistics work." She shrugged. "It should be." The rest of the shift moved quickly, but I caught myself checking my phone more often than usual. Not obsessively, just more than normal. There were no new messages, which was perfectly reasonable. The man was working, probably dealing with actual emergencies. Unlike me, wondering whether I should send another text. I didn't. Instead, around 4 that afternoon, my phone buzzed while I was wiping down the espresso machine. "Blake, still alive." Another message followed. "Blake, barely." Then one more. "Blake, how late is your cafe open tomorrow?" I answered before I could overthink it. "Me, until 7. Why?" 3 dots appeared almost immediately. "Blake, I finish at 6 if nothing catches fire." I laughed quietly. Emma looked over from the register. "What?" "Nothing." You smiled again. "I know." She folded her arms. "Coffee guy." I nodded. She smiled so widely I thought her face might actually hurt. I knew it. I looked back down at my phone just as another message arrived. "Blake, think your coffee offer is still available?" Without even realizing it, I was already smiling when I typed my answer. Me, it never expired. The next day crawled. There was no other way to describe it. Every hour felt twice as long as usual. The cafe stayed busy from opening until late afternoon, but my attention kept drifting toward the clock hanging above the pastry display. Not because I expected Blake to show up early, because I wanted time to move faster. Around 5:30, Emma caught me straightening the stack of coffee cups for what had to be the 10th time. "You've organized those 3 times already. They're crooked. They're perfectly aligned." I disagree. She crossed her arms. "What time is he coming?" "I don't know if he is." She raised an eyebrow. "You literally said he finishes at 6. "I know." So, firefighters respond to emergencies." She nodded. "Fair point." I glanced toward the front windows. The rain had finally disappeared. The evening sun painted everything outside with warm orange light. It felt like an entirely different city compared to the night we'd met. At exactly 6:18, the cafe door opened. I looked up automatically. There he was. Blake had traded his station uniform for dark jeans, a charcoal hoodie, and clean sneakers. Without the heavy boots and equipment, he looked younger somehow. Still broad-shouldered. Still taller than me, but less weighed down. The moment he spotted me, he smiled. Not the polite smile people give strangers. The kind that says they're genuinely glad you showed up. I found myself smiling back before I even realized it. Emma quietly leaned toward me. Definitely cute. I elbowed her without taking my eyes off Blake. He approached the counter. "So," he looked around dramatically. "I hear the coffee here is decent." "Depends who's making it." "I was hoping you'd say that. I've been told I'm biased." "I trust biased experts." Emma cleared her throat loudly. "I'll go check the back." Neither of us looked at her. As she disappeared into the kitchen, I heard her mutter just loudly enough. "You're welcome." I shook my head. My coworker has no sense of subtlety. I gathered that. Blake rested both forearms on the counter. You busy? We close in 40 minutes. I can wait. You don't have to. I know. He shrugged. I don't mind. Something about that answer stayed with me. He wasn't trying to impress me. He genuinely didn't seem bothered by waiting. So he found a table near the window. Every few minutes, I'd glance over while making drinks. Sometimes he looked out the window. Sometimes he scrolled through his phone. Once, I caught him watching me work. When our eyes met, neither of us looked away immediately. It wasn't awkward, just noticeable. At 7 sharp, I locked the front door. Blake stood as I flipped the sign to closed. You really do stay until the end. I told you. I thought maybe you'd exaggerated. I save my exaggerations for important things. Like the quality of my coffee. He laughed. I walked right into that. Emma grabbed her bag. I'll leave you two alone. She stopped beside Blake. Take good care of him. His expression softened immediately. I'll do my best. Emma looked at me with a tiny, satisfied smile before leaving. Outside, the evening had cooled. Still want coffee? I asked. He looked at the espresso machine. Aren't you tired of making it? I drink more coffee after work than during work. I suddenly understand why you have so much energy. I don't. You hide it well. I made 2 cappuccinos. One for him, one for me. Instead of sitting inside, we carried them outside to the small patio where the cafe kept a handful of tables. The street had grown quiet. A few people wandered past. Cars rolled by every now and then. Nothing rushed. Nothing loud. For the first few minutes, we simply enjoyed the silence. Blake took one sip, closed his eyes. Oh, I smiled. What? You weren't exaggerating. I rarely do. You literally just admitted you exaggerate. Only about coffee. He laughed into his cup. I've had station coffee for 4 years. I'm sorry. I didn't realize how bad it was until now. I've ruined you. You absolutely have. We both laughed. It felt effortless. Eventually, he leaned back in his chair. So, you've been making coffee forever? Almost 6 years. You always wanted to? I thought about it. No. What did you want? I studied graphic design. His eyebrows lifted. Really? I was supposed to work in advertising. What happened? I shrugged. Life. My dad got sick during my last year of college. His expression changed immediately. He recovered. I smiled reassuringly. But bills don't wait for people. So you took the cafe job. I figured it'd be temporary. And now, I accidentally got good at it. He nodded slowly. I understand that. You do? I wanted to be a paramedic. That's pretty close. It is. But then I volunteered at a fire station. And they convinced me to stay. No regrets. He stared into his coffee for a moment. I've had hard days. He looked back up. But no, I've never regretted choosing it. There was quiet confidence in the way he said it. Not pride. Certainty. I admired that. What about you? He asked. Any regrets? I considered the question longer than expected. Not really. Then why did you hesitate? I laughed softly. Because sometimes I wonder if I'm standing still. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he watched people crossing the street. Finally, he spoke. I don't think standing still is the same as catching your breath. I looked at him. That's unexpectedly wise. I stole it. You did. My captain says it whenever someone starts questioning their entire life after a bad shift. It works. It usually annoys people first. It annoyed you? The first 10 times. And now, I repeated to strangers drinking coffee. We both smiled. The conversation drifted from jobs to music, then to favorite places in the city. I learned Blake had lived there his entire life. He knew every neighborhood, every shortcut, every tiny diner that never appeared online. He learned I'd only moved there after college, that I still got lost without GPS. You've been here 3 years. I have a terrible sense of direction. Clearly, I once drove 20 minutes in the wrong direction. How? I was confident. He laughed so hard he nearly spilled his coffee. Confidence really is dangerous. Especially mine. The sun had disappeared completely by then. Streetlights reflected softly across the pavement. Neither of us seemed interested in ending the evening. Eventually, Blake checked his watch and sighed. I should probably head home. You've got another shift? Tomorrow morning. Early. 6. I winced. You firefighters wake up before normal people. We think normal people are asleep too much. I respectfully disagree. He smiled. I expected you would. We stood at the same time. Neither of us seemed in any hurry to actually leave. Thanks, he said. For the coffee. For waiting. He He shook his head. It was worth waiting. There was something quiet about the way he said it. Not flirtatious, just honest. We started walking together toward the corner where our routes split. So, Blake shoved his hands into his hoodie pocket. Same time next week? I looked at him. You've already scheduled another coffee? I'm an organized person. You left half your equipment in the street when we met. That was fatigue. So this is your normal level of organization? I'd like to believe so. I laughed. I think I'd like to test that theory. He smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. When we reached the intersection, we stopped. This is me, I said. This is me too. Neither of us moved immediately. Then Blake scratched the back of his neck. I know this sounds strange. I waited. But it feels like we've known each other longer than 2 days. I felt exactly the same. I was just thinking that. His smile returned. Good. He stepped backward toward the opposite sidewalk. I'll text you. I'll answer. Good night, Zachary. Good night, Blake. As I watched him walk away, I realized something that caught me completely off guard. I wasn't excited because I'd met someone interesting. I was excited because, for the first time in a long while, I was genuinely looking forward to tomorrow, not because of work, but because I knew my phone might light up with a message from Blake. For the next few days, we settled into something that didn't have a name yet. It wasn't dating. It wasn't friendship in the usual sense, either. It was simply talking. Sometimes it was a quick message during my lunch break. Sometimes it was a photo Blake sent from the station's kitchen with the caption, "Whoever made this chili should be questioned by the authorities." I replied with a picture of the cinnamon rolls cooling behind the cafe counter. This is what competent professionals produce. His answer came less than a minute later. I'm filing a complaint against my entire crew. I laughed so loudly that one of my regular customers looked over. Good news? Mr. Ellis asked. Something like that. Keep smiling. He picked up his coffee. It suits you. I didn't realize how obvious the change had become until people started pointing it out. Emma noticed first. Then Mr. Ellis. Then my sister during our Sunday phone call. You sound different. I do. Yeah. She paused. Lighter. I leaned against my kitchen counter. Work's been good. MHM. And I met someone. Silence. Then. You what? I pulled the phone away from my ear. Can you not yell? You've been single for almost 2 years. I know. And you casually slipped, I met someone into the conversation like you bought new shoes. I didn't know it was important. It is extremely important. I laughed. We've had coffee twice. So that's all. She sighed dramatically. Tell me everything. There isn't everything. There never is. I smiled despite myself. His name's Blake. Ooh, he's a firefighter. Double ooh. I helped him after work. And we've been talking. She was quiet for a second. Then her voice softened. You like him? I looked out my apartment window. I think I do. Does he make you smile like this all the time? What do you mean? You've smiled through this entire conversation. I hadn't even noticed. Maybe. She laughed. I like him already. You've never met him. I don't need to. After hanging up, I found myself thinking about her question. Did I like Blake? The obvious answer was yes. But it felt different from the crushes I'd had before. There wasn't any rush. No pressure. No uncertainty about whether I could be myself around him. From our very first conversation, everything had felt uncomplicated. That alone made him different. 3 days later, Blake texted just after noon. Unexpected day off. I answered while refilling sugar containers. Congratulations. Did the city agree not to catch fire? Temporarily. Another message arrived. Want to get lunch? I glanced at the clock. My shift ended in 45 minutes. Yes. His reply came instantly. I'll pick you up at 2. I froze for a second. Pick me up. For some reason, those 3 words made this feel more real than all our conversations combined. Sounds good. At exactly 2, I stepped outside the cafe. Blake's pickup was parked across the street. This time it looked clean. No scattered equipment. No open tailgate. Just sunlight reflecting off freshly washed paint. As I crossed the street, he climbed out. You cleaned it. He looked confused. What? The truck? Oh. He glanced back at it. I figured first impressions should improve. I laughed. My first impression involved you fighting storage bins. I know. You set the bar low. Exactly. He opened the passenger door. I had nowhere to go but up. The inside of the truck smelled faintly of pine air freshener and coffee. Real coffee. Not station coffee, apparently. I've upgraded, he said, noticing me looking at the travel mug. I see that. You ruined me. I warned you. He smiled as he started the engine. I've been thinking. That's dangerous. So I've been told. He pulled onto the road. I spend all day helping strangers. Okay. But when my shift ends, he shrugged. I usually don't want to talk to anyone. I looked over at him. But you text me. Exactly. The admission hung quietly between us. After a moment, he smiled without taking his eyes off the road. I don't know what that says about you. I choose to believe it's a compliment. It definitely is. Lunch turned into almost 3 hours. We found a small diner Blake insisted made the best sandwiches in the city. They're good, I admitted after the first bite. Told you. They're not life-changing. You wound me. They're very good. Better. An older waitress refilled our drinks twice. By the third visit, she smiled knowingly. You boys in any hurry? Blake glanced at me. I answered before either of us could overthink it. Not really. She smiled. Good. When she walked away, Blake laughed quietly. I think she adopted us. I think she assumed we're regulars. We've never been here together. Maybe she knows something we don't. He looked at me for a second longer than usual. Maybe. After lunch, we wandered through a nearby park. Children played on the swings. A man practiced guitar beneath a tree. Dogs chased tennis balls across the grass. It was one of those rare afternoons where nobody seemed to be rushing anywhere. Blake stopped near a small pond. I come here after difficult shifts sometimes. You do? He nodded. It helps. Doing what? Remembering that the world keeps moving. He skipped a small stone across the water. Bad days can make everything feel smaller. I understood what he meant. When my dad was sick, I said quietly, I used to walk without knowing where I was going. He looked at me. I wasn't trying to solve anything. I smiled faintly. I just needed proof that life still existed outside hospitals. He nodded once. I know that feeling. Neither of us spoke for a while. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It never seemed to be with Blake. Eventually, he turned toward me. Can I ask you something? Sure. When you stopped to help me. I smiled. The boxes again? No. He shook his head. Why did you actually stop? I told you. You said I looked like I needed someone to ask. I meant it. He studied my face. You really would have done that for anyone? I thought honestly about the question. I don't know. That surprised even me. I searched for the right words. I think something about you made me feel like stopping. He looked away toward the pond. A small smile appeared. I'm glad you did. So am I. Neither of us noticed that the afternoon had quietly slipped into evening until Blake's phone vibrated. He checked the screen. His expression changed. Not dramatically, just enough for me to notice. Everything okay? He nodded. Someone called in sick. My stomach sank. They need you. He sighed. Yeah. I hated how disappointed I felt. We'd only spent a few hours together, yet somehow it already felt too short. Blake slipped the phone back into his pocket. I should go. I know. Neither of us moved immediately. Then, almost shyly, he smiled. I was really enjoying today. I met his eyes. So was I. For a moment, it felt like he wanted to say something else. Instead, he simply nodded. I'll text you after my shift. I'll be awake. He smiled. I had a feeling you would be. As we walked back toward his truck, I realized something important. The best part of spending time with Blake wasn't that he was funny or kind or easy to talk to. It was that, without either of us trying, we were already becoming part of each other's ordinary days. And somehow, that felt more meaningful than any grand romantic gesture ever could. Blake wasn't kidding when he said he'd text after his shift. At 12:43 a.m., just as I was about to put my phone on the nightstand, it buzzed. Blake, still awake? I smiled. Me. I said I would be. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Blake, you keep your promises. Me. Usually. A few seconds passed. Blake, sorry today got cut short. I leaned back against my pillow. Me. That's part of your job. I'm not going to compete with emergencies. His reply took a little longer this time. Blake, thanks for understanding. There was something in those words that felt heavier than the conversation itself. As if he wasn't just talking about today. As if he'd spent years apologizing to people for being called away. I typed carefully. Me. You don't have to apologize for helping people. The typing indicator appeared. Stopped. Started again. Finally. Blake, you'd be surprised how many people stop understanding after a while. I stared at the message. Before I could think too much about it, I answered. Me. I'm not planning to be one of them. Almost a full minute passed. Then, Blake, good night, Zachary. Me. Good night, Blake. Get some sleep. I didn't realize until the next morning that I'd fallen asleep smiling. The following week became a pattern. Not repetitive, comfortable. Some mornings Blake would text before sunrise. Coffee acquired. Barely functional. Other days I'd send him a picture of whatever ridiculous pastry Emma had convinced me to bake. He responded to almost everything. Not with long conversations. Just enough. Enough to make me feel included in his day. One Thursday afternoon, my phone buzzed while I was carrying a tray of fresh muffins. Blake, you working Saturday? Me. Until 4. A few moments later. Blake, my station's hosting an open house. Families, kids, demonstrations. Another message followed. Blake, no pressure, but I'd like you to come. I read it twice. Then a third time. It wasn't just an invitation. It felt like something else. Like he was opening a door into a part of his life I'd only heard about. Me, I'd love to. His answer came almost instantly. Blake, really? I laughed quietly. Me, was there supposed to be a trick? Blake, no. I just wasn't sure you'd be interested. Me, I want to see where you disappear to every few days. Blake, fair enough. Saturday arrived faster than expected. After finishing my shift, I hurried home, changed into jeans and a navy sweater, and checked the address Blake had texted me 3 separate times. In case GPS fails you. He wasn't wrong. I still had a terrible sense of direction. The fire station sat on a corner lot with its large bay doors wide open. Families wandered through the building. Children climbed into fire engines under the supervision of smiling firefighters. Someone grilled hamburgers near the parking lot. The whole place felt surprisingly welcoming. I spotted Blake almost immediately. He stood near one of the engines explaining equipment to a little boy who couldn't have been older than 6. Instead of rushing through the explanation, Blake crouched until they were eye level. He let the boy hold one of the helmets. Answered every question with complete seriousness. When the child ran back to his parents, grinning from ear to ear, Blake stood again. That's when he noticed me. His entire expression brightened. There wasn't any hesitation. He walked straight over. You came. I said I would. I know. He smiled. I was still happy to see it. Without the pressure of work or late-night exhaustion, he seemed lighter, more relaxed. Welcome to Station 12. I looked around. So this is where you disappear. Most of the time. He gestured toward the trucks. Want the grand tour? I'd be disappointed if there wasn't one. Good answer. For the next hour, he showed me everything. The engines, the medical equipment, the kitchen where the crew cooked together, the small gym tucked into the back of the station, even the sleeping quarters. It's quieter than I expected, I admitted. It usually isn't. He smiled. Today's the exception. As we walked back toward the garage, another firefighter called out. Blake, a tall man with gray at his temples approached, carrying 2 bottles of water. You gonna introduce your friend? Blake looked at me, then back at him. This is Zachary. He smiled. He owns the cafe I've been telling everyone about. The older firefighter extended his hand. So you're responsible. I frowned. For what? He won't stop complaining about our coffee. Blake looked completely unapologetic. It deserves criticism. His captain laughed. I've worked with this guy for 6 years. He looked at me. I've never heard him recommend a coffee shop before. Something warm settled quietly in my chest. Blake had been talking about me. Not just the coffee. Me. I'll take that as a compliment, I said. It is. The captain smiled knowingly. I'm Harris. Nice to meet you. You too. He glanced between us for barely a second before someone called his name from across the garage. I'll let you two continue. As he walked away, I looked at Blake. You've been talking about me? He suddenly seemed interested in adjusting the sleeve of his station shirt. Maybe. Blake. I mentioned the cafe. And, he sighed with a small smile. I mentioned the guy who convinced me station coffee wasn't acceptable. That's all. He looked at me. His smile softened. I might have also mentioned that meeting you made a particularly difficult week a lot better. For a second, neither of us spoke. Not because it was awkward, because neither of us seemed to know what could possibly improve on that answer. A loud siren shattered the moment. Every firefighter in the garage reacted instantly. The relaxed atmosphere disappeared. Blake's expression changed in an instant, not cold, just focused. His radio crackled. Medical assist. He looked at me with obvious disappointment. You have to go. I know. I'm okay. He hesitated anyway. I'm really sorry. I smiled. You already know what I'm going to say. A corner of his mouth lifted. I'm helping people. You don't need to apologize for that. For just a heartbeat. He looked at me as if trying to memorize my face. Then he nodded once. I'll call you later. Before I could answer, he was already moving with the rest of his crew, climbing into the engine with practiced speed. Seconds later, the truck rolled out of the station. I stood there watching until the flashing lights disappeared around the corner. Captain Harris stepped beside me, folding his arms. He likes you. I looked over, surprised. I wasn't trying to hide it. No. He smiled. You weren't. There was a brief silence. Then he added quietly, I've worked with Blake a long time. I listened. He's good at taking care of everyone else. He looked down the road where the engine had vanished. But he's not always good at letting people take care of him. I thought back to that rainy evening, to scattered equipment, to tired blue eyes, to a man who had looked like he needed someone to ask if he was okay. I noticed, I said softly. Captain Harris smiled. I figured you had. I stayed at the station for another 20 minutes. Families slowly wandered home. Children climbed into waiting cars, proudly wearing plastic firefighter helmets. The grills cooled down. The laughter faded. Without the engines and people moving through the bays, the building suddenly felt much larger. Captain Harris found me again while stacking folding chairs. You don't have to wait around, he said. I know. I glanced toward the open bay doors. I guess I was hoping they'd come back. They will. He smiled. Whether it'll be in 30 minutes or 3 hours, that's the unpredictable part. I nodded. I should probably head home. Probably. He extended his hand before I left. It was good meeting you, Zachary. You too. As I walked toward my car, he called after me. And tell Blake to stop bringing those fancy pastries. I turned around. He shares them. Captain Harris laughed. Not willingly. That made me smile all the way home. By the time I reached my apartment, evening had settled over the city. I changed into comfortable clothes, made myself dinner, and tried reading for a while. I managed exactly 4 pages. Every few minutes, I found myself glancing toward my phone. Not because I expected Blake to text immediately, because I hoped he would. Around 9:30 p.m., it finally buzzed. Blake, home. Another message followed. Blake, sorry. I answered almost immediately. Me, stop apologizing. A few seconds later. Blake, working on it. I smiled. Me, how was the call? This time there was a longer pause. When his reply came, it was short. Blake, everyone's okay. That told me enough. I didn't ask for details. Instead, me, good. The typing indicator appeared. Blake, thanks for coming today. Me, thanks for inviting me. Another pause. Then, Blake, I was nervous. That surprised me. Me, why? His answer arrived one sentence at a time. Blake, because those people are important to me. A moment later. Blake, and you are too. I stared at the screen. Read the message again. Then once more. There wasn't anything dramatic about the words. No declaration. No pressure. Just simple honesty. I took a slow breath before replying. Me, I'm glad I got to meet them. Almost immediately. Blake, they liked you. I laughed quietly. Me, even after ruining the station coffee? Blake, especially after that. For a while, neither of us sent anything else. It didn't feel unfinished. Just comfortable. Sunday afternoon, I was restocking shelves when someone walked into the cafe carrying a bouquet of bright yellow flowers. I looked up. Blake, what are those? He looked down at the flowers as though he'd forgotten he was holding them. Oh, I panicked. I blinked. You panicked. I walked past the flower stand. And I thought bringing nothing felt wrong. So you bought flowers. I may have overcorrected. I couldn't stop smiling. I've never been given flowers before. His eyebrows lifted. Seriously? Seriously. Well, he held them out awkwardly. Now you have. I accepted them carefully. They're beautiful. I have absolutely no idea what kind they are. I don't either. We both laughed. Emma appeared from the kitchen carrying a tray. She stopped. Looked at Blake. Looked at the flowers. Looked at me. Oh. I closed my eyes. No. She ignored me completely. Hi. Blake smiled politely. Hi. I'm Emma. Blake. She nodded slowly. The firefighter. I buried my face in one hand. You told her? Blake looked confused. I came up in conversation. Emma grinned. You've come up in many conversations. Emma. What? She looked delighted. I've been waiting to meet you. Blake laughed. I wasn't aware anyone was waiting. Oh, I absolutely was. She pointed toward me. He pretends to be mysterious. I do not. You absolutely do. Blake looked between us with obvious amusement. I feel like I've walked into the middle of something. You have. Emma nodded. But don't worry. She smiled warmly. I approve. I groaned. Can I transfer to another cafe? No. She disappeared back into the kitchen before I could answer. Blake watched her leave. I like her. I apologize on her behalf. Don't. He smiled. She cares about you. Too much. I don't think that's possible. Those words stayed with me long after the conversation moved on. When my shift ended, we decided to take a walk instead of sitting somewhere. The weather was too nice to waste indoors. We wandered through downtown with no real destination. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we didn't. Neither of us seemed bothered by the quiet. At one point, we passed a street musician playing an old acoustic guitar. Without saying anything, Blake slowed down to listen. We stood there for an entire song. When it ended, he dropped a few bills into the open guitar case. You always do that? I asked as we continued walking. When I can. He shrugged. My mom used to stop for every musician she heard. You were close. His smile softened. Very. Were. He nodded. She passed away 5 years ago. I felt my chest tighten. I'm sorry. He looked ahead instead of at me. Me too. There was no self-pity in his voice. Just quiet truth. I think. He smiled faintly. She would have liked you. The words caught me completely off guard. You've known me for barely 2 weeks. I know. And you're already introducing me to your mom in hypothetical conversations? He laughed. When you put it like that, it sounds strange. It sounds very strange. But, I smiled. I'm honored. He looked over at me. So she probably would have been right. We kept walking. The city around us hummed with ordinary life. People carrying groceries. Couples walking dogs. Cyclists weaving through traffic. Nothing remarkable. Yet somehow, it felt like one of those moments I'd remember years later. Not because anything extraordinary had happened. Because Blake had started letting me into parts of his life that mattered. And I realized I wanted to know every one of them. Over the next couple of weeks, something shifted between us. Not all at once. There wasn't a single conversation where we suddenly decided what we were to each other. Instead, it happened in dozens of tiny moments. Blake started calling me during his drive home after longer shifts. Never for very long. 10 minutes. 15 if traffic was bad. Sometimes he'd tell me about the station dog that had unofficially adopted the crew. Sometimes he'd complain that Captain Harris kept pretending not to enjoy the pastries I sent. He took the last cinnamon roll, Blake said one evening. I thought he didn't like them. He claims they're too sweet. And I watched him hide one in the office. I laughed. So your captain steals pastries. I'm saying he lacks integrity. I'll remember that. Another time, I called him after closing the cafe. He answered on the second ring. Hey, you sound tired. I am. Long shift. He sighed softly. One of those days. I waited. He didn't owe me explanations. After a few seconds, he spoke again. Nothing went terribly wrong. But I met an older man today. His voice grew quieter. He reminded me of my grandfather. I listened. He kept apologizing to us. For what? For calling. Blake shook his head, though I could only hear it in his voice. He thought he was bothering everyone. My chest tightened. Was he? No. His answer came immediately. He was alone. Silence settled between us. Then he laughed quietly. I probably shouldn't dump this on you after you've worked all day. You're not dumping anything. Another pause. Thanks. The conversations never felt forced. Sometimes we spent 20 minutes talking. Sometimes 5. Sometimes one of us simply said, get some sleep. And that was enough. One Friday afternoon, Emma cornered me while we were restocking cups. So, I already knew that tone. So, you and Blake. I sighed. What about us? What are you? I blinked. I don't know. You haven't talked about it? No. She looked genuinely surprised. It's been almost a month. I know. And I don't want to rush him. She leaned against the counter. Does he seem like he's rushing you? No. Then maybe neither of you needs to. I thought about that long after she'd gone back to work. Maybe she was right. Maybe not every relationship needed a deadline. That evening, Blake picked me up after work. No destination? I asked as I climbed into the truck. I've got one. You sound confident. I am. 20 minutes later, we pulled into a scenic overlook above the river. The city stretched below us, glowing in the fading light. I'd lived there for 3 years. I'd never known this place existed. You've been hiding this. He smiled. I saved the good spots. For who? He looked at me. The right people. The answer landed somewhere deep inside me. We climbed out of the truck and leaned against the wooden railing overlooking the water. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. The silence felt full instead of empty. Eventually, Blake broke it. When I was a kid, he rested his forearms on the railing. My dad used to bring me here after baseball games. Were you good? He laughed. I was enthusiastic. So no. No. He grinned. I spent more time watching airplanes than baseballs. I can picture that. My dad used to pretend not to notice. He smiled to himself. Then he'd buy me ice cream anyway. I looked over at him. You don't talk about your family much. I know. You don't have to. I want to. He looked out across the river again. My parents were married for 32 years. I listened quietly. When Mom got sick, he swallowed. Dad barely left the hospital. His voice remained calm, but I could hear the weight beneath it. After she died, he shook his head. The house felt wrong. I'm sorry. He nodded once. It took him a long time to figure out who he was without her. A breeze moved across the overlook. Neither of us spoke. Finally, Blake smiled faintly. He's doing better now. That's good. He volunteers at the community center. What does he do? Mostly fixes things people break. I laughed. So that's where you get it. What? The instinct to help. He thought about it. Maybe. We stayed until the last of the sunlight disappeared. On the drive back, music played quietly through the speakers. Not loud enough to interrupt conversation, just enough to fill the comfortable spaces between it. Halfway home, Blake glanced at me. Can I admit something? Always. I almost didn't give you my number. I turned toward him. Really? He nodded. I figured you were just being nice. I was. He laughed. Exactly. So what changed your mind? He smiled without looking away from the road. You asked if I'd want coffee on my day off. That convinced you. You weren't trying to impress me. He shrugged. You were trying to make sure I rested. I hadn't thought about it that way. I like that. I looked out the passenger window for a moment. Then back at him. I'm glad you wrote your number down. So am I. When we reached my apartment building, neither of us rushed to end the evening. The truck idled quietly. Streetlights reflected off the windshield. I've got tomorrow off, Blake said. So do I. He smiled. I was hoping that would be your answer. What did you have in mind? He hesitated just enough to make me curious. My dad's grilling tomorrow. I looked at him. He asked if. Blake laughed nervously. If the coffee guy wanted to come over. For a second, I forgot how to answer. His crew. His station. Now his father. Each invitation felt like another piece of his world opening to me. You don't have to say yes. I want to. His shoulders relaxed almost immediately. Really? Really? A smile spread across his face, slow and unmistakably genuine. I think he's going to like you. I couldn't help smiling back. I have a feeling I'm looking forward to finding out. The next afternoon, I found myself standing on Blake's front porch holding a pie I'd bought from a bakery across town. Not because I thought it was necessary, because showing up empty-handed somehow felt wrong. Blake opened the door before I had a chance to knock. You brought something. I panicked. He laughed. I remember that feeling. So we're even. He stepped aside. Come in. The house was warm in the way only lived-in homes ever are. Not perfect. Comfortable. Family photos lined the hallway. Some showed Blake as a kid in oversized baseball uniforms. Others captured camping trips, birthdays, holidays. There were pictures of his mother in almost every room. Not hidden away. Still part of the home. I've been meaning to organize those albums. A voice called from the kitchen. I keep telling myself I'll start. A tall man with silver hair looked up from the grill just outside the sliding glass door. You must be Zachary. I am. He walked over and shook my hand firmly. I'm David. It's nice to meet you. I've heard an unreasonable amount about your coffee. I looked at Blake. You've really been talking. Blake rubbed the back of his neck. Maybe. David smiled. He hasn't stopped. Lunch was exactly what I'd hoped it would be. Simple. Relaxed. No awkward questions. No feeling like I had to prove anything. David asked about the cafe. I asked about the community center. Blake spent half the meal insisting his father exaggerated every childhood story. I was not afraid of ducks. David looked at me. He absolutely was. They were aggressive. They wanted breadcrumbs. They wanted violence. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my drink. For the first time in a long while, I understood what people meant when they talked about feeling included. No one made a big deal out of my being there. They simply made room for me. Later that afternoon, while David cleaned the grill, Blake and I wandered into the backyard. The sun filtered through an old oak tree that shaded most of the lawn. My mom planted this, Blake said quietly. I looked up into the branches. It's beautiful. It was tiny when I was little. He smiled. She said she'd probably never see how big it had become. He rested one hand lightly against the trunk. I think she'd like this. This? He looked at me. My life. There was something peaceful in his expression. Not sadness. Gratitude. I'm glad, I said. So am I. We stayed outside until David called us back inside for dessert. When it was finally time to leave, David walked us to the porch. Don't wait so long before coming back. I smiled. I won't. He nodded toward Blake. He smiles more these days. Blake groaned. Dad, what? He looked completely unapologetic. It's true. I glanced at Blake. It is. Blake rolled his eyes, but he couldn't hide his smile. On the drive home, neither of us spoke much. Not because we had nothing to say, because the day had already said enough. When he parked outside my apartment, we sat there for a moment. I was nervous, he admitted. I know. I kept wondering if you'd feel out of place. I didn't. He looked relieved. I felt. I searched for the right word. Welcome. He smiled. Good. Another quiet moment passed. Then he looked at me with that same honest expression I'd seen on the rainy night we met. You know? He laughed softly. It's strange. What is? I spend my job running toward emergencies. I listened. But meeting you. He shook his head with a smile. Felt like finally walking toward something peaceful. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I thought back to that first evening. A firefighter too exhausted to carry another equipment case. A stranger who almost kept walking. A simple question. Need a hand? It's funny, I said. What? I thought I was helping you that night. You were. I don't think I realized. I smiled. You were helping me too. He looked at me for a long second. I guess we both needed someone to stop. I think we did. As I climbed out of the truck, he called my name. Zachary. I turned back. I'm really glad I dropped those boxes. I laughed. I was just thinking the same thing. Months later, people would ask us how we met. Some expected a dramatic story. Others assumed it happened at the cafe. We always smiled before answering. No, Blake would say. It started after a very long shift. And after a very ordinary question. Because the truth was wonderfully simple. I helped a firefighter after his shift. We exchanged a few words in the rain. Then a cup of coffee. Then another. Somewhere between late-night messages, shared meals, long walks, and quiet conversations, we stopped being two strangers with busy lives and became two people who made room for each other in the middle of ordinary days. Looking back now, I don't remember the rain, or the scattered equipment, or even how tired Blake looked. What I remember is the moment he smiled when I asked if he needed help. Because sometimes the smallest acts of kindness become the beginning of everything. And once we started talking, we never really stopped.